Experience.
So if you are looking for a language tutor, you want to practice your language skills, especially if you don't live in the country where the country you're learning is spoken, or if you're traveling a lot like I am, then I recommend you go down to the description below the video and check out a link there for italki or italki, because that is a service I have used an awful lot over the last few years, as many of you know who are regular viewers to the channel. And there you're going to find tens of thousands of language tutors, and you can have classes with them, one-on-one individual classes via Skype. You don't have to meet them in person, and you can do all the payments online, and it's something that I have used regularly over the last few years to learn my languages. And of course you get a special discount if you go through my link. There is some starter credit of $10 towards your first lesson, so go check out the link to italki or italki, depending on which way you want to pronounce it. Hey there, so welcome back to the Zara Experience podcast with me, Conor Klein, and today is the first time that on this podcast series that I'm going to actually have a special guest on. It's Jon van der Raa from Language Boost.
From Language Boost, yeah. Conor, what an honor to be on your podcast, this third episode.
Well, this is probably episode number 3 unless we decide to put something in between. But anyway, so we're recording this as number 3. And we are in Brussels today, in Belgium, where Jan is actually living, where he's moved to. But you're from where exactly, Jan?
Well, you know very well where I'm from.
I've been there to Helmond.
You've been there a few times, yeah. So I'm from the Netherlands, a small city in the south called Helmond, not far from Eindhoven. That's a place that's a little bit more better known by foreigners. So
exactly, Eindhoven.
Yeah.
So basically in today's podcast, we're going to go through part of my language learning journey, this key in the Zara Experience in the system. And Jan has actually he's a YouTuber and he has his own business, he's an entrepreneur, and he's been along for a lot of the ride, especially when we first traveled to Eastern Europe. Yeah. So in this podcast, we're going to go through a lot of how Jan got on there and a lot of the things that we learned on the way about using languages, especially for traveling in Eastern Europe. So Jan, it's good to have you on as a guest. We don't get to hang out as much as we used to because you're living here in Brussels and you don't travel as much. But explain a little bit your own background. Introduce yourself to everybody on the podcast.
Okay, guys. So my name is, well, as I said, Jon van der Raa, from the Netherlands, currently living in Brussels. It's like 6 years ago we started a translation agency, which actually allowed me to work online. And then I met Conor 5 years ago, and I got really more interested about learning foreign languages. And you know, I've always, just like Conor, I've always been very, very bad at learning languages at high school. So when I was 19, I went abroad for the first time. I got the opportunity to go to Costa Rica. I wanted to learn Spanish, even though I failed at learning English in high school. I learned some Spanish there, but I never really got to a level where I could actually use the language. So this whole experience was basically a confirmation that I was really bad at learning languages. And you know, maybe my English teacher back at high school was actually right when he said, Jan, learning languages is not something for you. I hope that you're going to choose for a career for which English or any other foreign language for that matter is not going to be involved.
So this is kind of what I discussed on the second episode of the podcast. My own is the overlap in our stories. So I also had I sucked at learning languages at high school. My 3 worst results were in the languages even. And also people would have thought like, why would this guy ever do anything with language? But ironies of ironies is actually something that we became extremely good at. So that's just some inspiration for any of you out there who think, language is not my thing, I'm not talented at it. That's all BS, right? Anyone with the right motivation can learn languages. And we're both testament to that, because we could only speak our native tongues badly, one would say, when we finished high school. You know, and now we've gone on to learn like probably 10 each or whatever.
Exactly, because you know, for me it was just like, if you didn't manage to learn the language at school, it doesn't mean that you're not made to learn language, but you just need to change. You need to try different methodologies. You need to try something new, basically. So after I failed learning English and Spanish, I actually got the opportunity a few years later to go on an exchange to China, where I spent 6 months. And again, in China, I had Chinese lessons every single day. And you know, I was passing my exams, but still didn't have the feeling that I was really learning something. So I changed my approach, and instead of learning a language in the classroom and not using it, I actually changed my approach, and I didn't work so hard during in the lessons anymore. But I really started using the language outside of the classroom, and I really, after 5 months, I was able to hold simple. Well, I would say conversational in Chinese. I could have simple conversation in Chinese, and I was at that time that I thought, okay, maybe I actually could become pretty successful at learning new languages. And then I started learning from all these polyglots, even polyglots like you, Connor, like try.
He's also one.
Try different approaches, and then I thought I think I can learn any language, and started traveling, spending time in Brazil, in Morocco, where I learned French, and these days I have a YouTube channel, or me together with my partner Lucas, where we help all people to learn foreign languages. That's called Language Boost. So that's a little bit about my background. So long introduction. Sorry for the long background story.
No problem. This is the format on a podcast. We have a lot more time to go into the detail, to get into the meat, rather than a short YouTube video, which has to be boom, 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 boom. So one thing that I relate to a lot is when Jan said that he stopped really trying to do what the teacher said in the classes, right? I also tend to do the same, even if I have a language class today. Like, my thing is not to to get the high score or get the diploma in the language. It's actually to pick up a lot of tips and tricks during the actual class or the lesson, and then go out and apply them with real people, because that's the purpose of what I'm trying to do.
I think there is a huge difference between being a good student and being a good learner, and that's actually something that I presented somewhere in I think in Berlin a few years ago, where I gave a presentation, and I basically pointed out that a good student is someone who learns for a test, right? The goal is to pass a test, to get a good grade. So when you learn a language in school, that's the goal, to pass an exam. But what we do, we don't have to pass an exam. We just want to be able to speak the language. And if you want to speak a language, you have to do other things
in order to achieve that goal. So I can relate to this a lot, because I was, I always did really well in exam. Well, I didn't always do well, but anyways, in both high school and university, I got top grades, right?
Yeah.
And so passing an exam was something I was always really good at, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't, and I can speak to this from personal experience, but I actually started working, for example. That's a very different mentality and skill set to actually being effective in the real world, because getting the top grade does not make you equipped for actually performing and actually achieving goals that are not exam based. So language learning is exactly the same. Getting the top grade is not the same as actually being able to learn the language and actually use it in your real life. For example, a lot of exams test you on the grammar and all this stuff that's very technical, that it makes a tiny difference in the real world. Actually being able to open up people and speak to them and communicate is a lot more important. It's going to be a lot more value to you, especially if you're traveling somewhere and you're meeting new people. Like, you see it with a lot of people who are students of languages, that when they're actually almost scared to start speaking, because they think, I make mistakes, this is bad. Whilst we're like, we got to make 100 mistakes, otherwise we're not making any progress. So this is a very different mind shift. I want to just talk a little bit, Jan, about going to Eastern Europe.
That is just one thing that I would like to add to that. So at school we focus on learning many things. Like, we focus on learning vocabulary, all the grammatical features, all the grammar, like difficult grammar, but we do not really learn how to use the language. And I think that's something that we do differently these days. We do not focus necessarily much on words and grammar. Of course, you need to have some vocabulary and you need to know the basic structure of the language, but once you know that, actually you can already start using the language, and that's something that you do on your trips. And basically, so that's also something that we recommend at the Language Boost. Like, you don't have to learn thousands of words.
Exactly. Jan has a great product that he's developed with his partner Lucas, where they actually help you learn the first 500 or 600 words, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the new language. I used it for Ukrainian. I actually made a review of it. I'll link all this down below in the description. You guys can go and check it out if you're interested in learning more about how to get those first words. And once you have them down, then you got to use them, right? So learning
complicated advanced grammar that you wouldn't even know in your native tongue how to describe it is not going to help you communicate with people.
Yeah.
It's actually going to make it harder because you're going to be so focused on not making mistakes and getting some obscure grammatical point right that, dude, you need to order a sandwich, right? This doesn't help. So
It's really going to be more helpful if you know 500 words and some basic grammar and you actually know how to use it than knowing thousands and thousands of words and not being able to make any sentences with that. And that's exactly what happens to, I would say in the Netherlands, the Dutch are pretty good at languages. We are a small country, we have a lot of exposure to languages like English, but if you go to like Russia, China, Japan, those people there, the students there, they learn English for, I don't know, more than 10 years in high school. They can't speak a word of English after graduation. They know all the words, but they've never learned to use what they've learned. And that's really something that I think both of us have been doing very
exactly, that's been the mind shift, the focus shift that we've undergone in the last, say, 10 years,
Yes.
especially the last 5 years since we've been on YouTube. So Jan actually came with me 5 years ago, I think it is now, on a trip to Eastern Europe. So Jan, at the time, I spoke reasonably good Russian, I think, or at least I was developing Russian skills, spoke some Romanian, and you had never visited the region. This is one of the big things. We actually met at the first Polyglot conference in Budapest, and afterwards Jan was like, hey, I'm really interested in going to Romania, to Moldova, to Ukraine, because he was on a mission to visit 100 countries before he turned 30. And those countries were kind of easy ones for him to pick off, and I had some experience in traveling there, not as much as I do now, of
I
course.
was like, I need someone who's going to show me around Ukraine, otherwise I'm going to get...
He's going to be, bad things are going to happen to him, which is, well, it can happen, but anyways. So you came on this trip with me. Maybe we can set the background to it exactly, like our itinerary, how you felt before going on this trip, and what happened, especially with the languages on that first trip that we took together.
So we started our journey in, this was in Romania, right? So we started in Romania, we went to Moldova, in Odessa, afterwards we went to Odessa in Ukraine, and I really saw, because at the time, well, I spoke Chinese and English. I didn't speak so many languages. This whole language learning thing was new to me, and I really saw like how Connor was able to communicate with the locals, basically, how he was able to connect to the locals by speaking all these foreign languages. So he spoke Romanian in Romania, there were even some Romanian girls who spoke Italian. Connor switched to Italian. Now we met these Brazilian football players in a bar in Galat, somewhere in the city in the northeast.
No, it's in the east, extreme east, near to the border with Ukraine, that kind of the southeast.
Then we went to Ukraine, where we spoke Russian, you know, and for me this was amazing. I was just a tourist, only speaking English, and I saw that Connor was having a completely different experience than I was having, and I thought, man, that would be really cool if you speak all these languages. And you know, not only because it's cool, but it's also practical, because maybe we could talk about the experience that I had at the train station in Odessa.
So basically,
Connor,
I think on that trip, we spoke in like 8 languages, even though like there was only Russian, Romanian officially been languages like between those 3 countries, Moldova, Romania, and Ukraine. Actually, Russian is not official in Ukraine, just to be clarified that, but of course most people speak Russian as their first language in Odessa. And a lot of people in Moldova also speak Russian. Most of the population can speak it, even if it's a second language. But we actually spoke in French on the bus we went to Transnistria, which is a separatist enclave in Moldova where people speak Russian mainly, but we met some French language students on the bus there, if I remember.
Exactly.
So we actually spoke in French to them. But it's
I think you spoke. I didn't know you speak any French.
you didn't speak French at the time, right? And I spoke in Italian with this girl in Galatz, and then I think we spoke Spanish at some stage as well. And some other girls in Galatz.
No, it was like with the Portuguese, with the football players.
Yeah,
I
Portuguese.
didn't speak Portuguese. I tried some Spanish. Yeah.
So I think we went through all these languages on the trip. It was pretty much, even though most of them were not actually spoken in those countries particularly. An important thing there is it allowed me to make a connection with the people, because it's something you have in common, right? I mean, the Brazilian footballers that we met in this nightclub in Galatz, they actually played for the local team, and like if you'd spoken to them in English or if you'd spoken to them in Romanian, it wouldn't have been the same effect as boom, tudo bem, você de onde?
They gave us beer for free or whiskey or whatever they were drinking. We got free drinks and yeah.
So this was, I got a few free drinks with some Brazilian footballers. Anyways, they were cool guys to hang out with, but it definitely changed the experience. Now, Jan came to Odessa. It was the end of the trip. We'd been together for maybe a week, and he was leaving to go to Kiev by train the next morning. We went out partying in Odessa to, I can't remember which club we brought him to, probably a Ibiza club because it's the most famous. And at the time, it wasn't, I don't really recommend it as much today in the night, but anyways, at the time it was still a cool place to show him. I got up at, I don't know, like midday the next day because we were partying quite late, and Jan was already supposed to have left and be on a train from Odessa in the south of Ukraine up to Kiev in the capital in the north. So I wrote him a message, like, Jan, how's the trip going? Not expecting him to reply because connectivity is going to be really poor, but I got a reply straight back. Yeah, Connor, I'm still in Odessa at the train station. I was like, why the hell are you still in the train station? So maybe you can take up the story there. What the hell had happened?
Yeah, so I arrived at the train station, and what I didn't know is that in Ukraine you have like different kiosks for, like if you want a ticket for today, you have to go, they have like a particular kiosk for that, right?
Yeah.
And then they have like another place where you can buy tickets for, I don't know, tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Then you also have one like for domestic trains and then international trains, like, so you have all these different kiosks. And I guess it was indicated, but it was all in Russian.
It was in Ukrainian actually in the train station.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Legally, I think they have everything in Ukrainian. But anyways, that in any case, you can understand.
Actually, I didn't see the difference. And then I remember, so I didn't know where to go, and then I saw this kiosk where there was like a very big line, and you know, I just queued for 30 minutes, and then it was finally my turn. And she asked me, I don't know, kuda, or she asked me like, where the hell are you, where are you going to? And I didn't know what she was asking, but the only words I knew was basically Kiev. So I just said Kiev. And then she was asking me today or tomorrow, or what time, which train do you want to have? I had no idea what they were asking me. And then passport, okay, this is one word I actually understood. But I didn't know what they were asking me, and then like the people behind me in the queue, they were getting frustrated because I was taking all the time, right? And I felt all the frustration from the people behind me in the queue, and I was just like, shit, I can't get these train tickets. I better just leave.
Abandon the whole idea.
And call Connor instead.
Yeah, exactly. So I got a phone call. Can you please come to the train station and find me a ticket?
I think I even tried a second kiosk. Like I waited another 15 minutes there, but I didn't manage to get the tickets there either. So eventually, I just called you, and you came. I don't know. You said two things, and we got my ticket. So yeah, it's gonna be helpful if you speak at least some Russian. And that day was actually the day I thought, shit, if I want to come to Ukraine or any Russian-speaking country more often, I really have to learn at least the basics in Russian, and I did it. Yeah.
So he's managed to learn Russian since. At the time, you couldn't buy the tickets online. That was another problem. So you couldn't even. Now you can actually buy train tickets in Ukraine. You can buy them online using an English interface. But if you have a problem in the station, you got to be able to read Ukrainian because a lot of things are written in Ukrainian, and then speak in Russian to the people around you. Because also people in the queue, they didn't speak any English, so you couldn't even ask people for help at the time. I remember first time I had to buy a train ticket, and I did speak some Russian. I was in Lviv, so I was able to communicate, but it was super stressful. And actually I remember being in St. Petersburg and having to buy a ticket, and obviously speaking in Russian, when my Russian wasn't very good, and it was really stressful as well to get the ticket because they have so many questions. What compartment, what
exactly. Like first class, second class, today, what time, compartment, then you need to give your passport, what else do they need to know? So many questions.
And then the ticket comes out and it's just got lines of numbers and obviously letters and words written in Cyrillic, so you got to be able to read Cyrillic. And the whole it's not like it says like Kiev to Odessa and then it's just got the time, a little icon for the seat or whatever. It was like just words. I remember that Russian train ticket was like something to decipher, right? So that was really tricky. And Jan was lucky because, I mean, obviously I came down to the train station straight away, but if not, I don't know, you would have got a bus eventually or hitchhiked, so, I don't know how to.
Taxi,
taxi for 6 hours to get around the problem. So there, I think you saw the value on a practical level of learning Russian.
Do you think it's actually possible to have a good time and to travel around Ukraine only speaking English? Because you have friends who have visited you, right?
I think, and this is why a lot of my friends give me these kind of testimonials about traveling with me. I think you can have an amazing time without speaking Russian, but you still have to get over that language barrier. So there are a few ways to get over the language barrier, and one of them is to learn the language. I mean, that's the most, but that obviously takes an investment of time in order to achieve that. Or you hire an interpreter, which is going to be expensive. I've seen people do that. They've come to Ukraine, they have an interpreter, just pay some local language students to go around everywhere. That also takes organization and money to do, and then you got the person with you all the time, and it's not the same level of.
Do you want to have someone around like 24/7 almost?
To help you out? Well, it depends. Or you have a buddy there, a friend, and they can lead you around and not just translate for you or interpret for you, but also show
Show you
you
the best
everything in the best
And
places.
that's exactly what you do, right?
But now that's what I do. I started doing it for friends. Like a lot of my friends came to Ukraine in particular, to Odessa, to Lviv, to Kiev, and I was there with them. Said, no, this is what you do. This is the culture, especially if you're interacting with the local people, with girls, whatever. This is what you have to understand is the cultural norm here, and this is what is like considered good. Appropriate behavior is not considered good appropriate behavior. This is how you get cheaper prices. And now we got to speak in Russian, so I'll take care of that part of the equation. So you can do it, but I think if you don't at least have a friend there who speaks the language, it's going to be extremely tough. And I like one of the questions I get asked by a lot of guys who come and they meet me and they say, oh, that's super cool, you're there probably with some pretty girls in the club, and they're like, oh, how can I have the same experience and not learn Russian? And I'm like, well, it'd be better if you just learned Russian, right? Also, not just for language, also because you have to put yourself in the mental state of the people of the place to really understand them. But then you have to overcome the barrier. You're gonna have to employ someone. You're either gonna have to hire me as a coach, or you're gonna have to hire an interpreter. You're gonna have to solution to that language barrier, because you are not going to be able to just use English and have the same amazing experience. That is hands down the reality. My friends have come with me and have phenomenal times, but even like my close friend who comes, even he's frustrated, and he's actually for the first time starting to Russian. He can do everything, like he can get around, because obviously with my help over the year in my coaching, I've shown him he's able to interact with beautiful women, everything, have these romantic affairs, but even he is frustrated, and he's like, yeah, I need to learn Russian, man. This is like, I cannot function on the same level.
How much Russian do you need to know? I mean, like, is it feasible to say that you just studied Russian for a few months and then you come to Odessa and you're fluent in Russian? Or like, how much do you
that's a very good question.
Need to learn?
So hey there, congratulations on getting this far in my interview with Jan Fundera of Language Boost. I trust you're enjoying this episode of podcast so far. As it turns out, I'm no longer in Brussels. As you can see, I am in Odessa on the Black Sea in Ukraine, and this episode was actually really long when it came to editing it, so we decided to break it into two parts. So you've just seen or listened to the first part of this episode, and next week you're going to get the second episode, part 2. In the meantime, of course, if you're not a subscriber to either the podcast or the YouTube channel, then go and do that. Just squeeze that red button, whack the notification bell, and give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in part 2. And listen, well, I won't be able to see you if you're listening to this in the podcast, but yeah, do svidaniya, and till next week from Odessa, Ukraine.
SAR Experience.